Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving O'Shorty, and yes, I do speak quite quickly. I apologise, but I have a lot to say about comic books and where they exist in the real world, and it's no different for this one, which is the Night Thrasher, which we'll be talking about today. And with a name like Night Thrasher, you know you're going to get something very Marvel 90s kind of vibe to it. I don't really know much about the character, and if I was a better YouTube reviewer, I'd have done a lot more research. All I really remember is he had a skateboard, I think, and then I read the comic book, and yeah, he had a skateboard as part of his costume on his back, but that seemed to mainly just give something people to hold on to when they're fighting. It felt kind of like a useless appendage at this point. And it is a half-decent comic book for a lot of things. There's some interesting things to talk about, certainly in regard to how it looks at some of its political takes, because it is a heavily political comic book. But unfortunately, it's also a comic book which is not the best drawn in the world. And I don't want to dunk too much on it. I don't want to say this is like terrible artwork. It doesn't do some of those ridiculous things which I get annoyed at when artists don't seem to understand how things like foreshortening work, or have a misunderstanding of human anatomy, or can't figure out three-point perspective to save their life. It's more just the fact that it is thoroughly uninspiring. It doesn't really do anything, and does a few things quite badly. It does the thing which bugs me in all comic books, is when the background kind of fades away to nothingness instead of actually putting in the detail to make it part of the world. There's a weird thing where sometimes characters in the foreground have this aura around them, so you can't see the art leading into them. It's just kind of like this field where nothing else can exist, and that's frustrating. There's also fight scenes which are not bad, but they rely too much on motion lines rather than actually dynamic artwork. It's very much like C-list Marvel art. It doesn't do anything that really excites me, but it's not bad enough for me to really complain about it. I'm not saying don't buy it because it's bad artwork. It's just maybe check if it's for you first. The writing is better, like right from the get-go. This is a character I don't really know much about. I had no idea he was part of the New Warriors, or maybe even formed them, but all the information I needed to understand the story was actually presented pretty accurately and pretty concisely at the beginning. There was no big info dumps. It was just a case of people talking about who they are, where they are in the world, their relationship with the people, their background. It all kind of comes together in really quite nice story beats, which none of it feels forced. And I'm like fairly quickly being like, okay, I'm kind of getting into this. It's a cool little story about some cool characters. But it loses me around the halfway mark, because this guy, Night Thrasher, his family was really, really rich, and I think possibly had some ties to organised crime, and they set up an institute to help the people of Harlem, basically the disenfranchised kind of people of Harlem. And I think he kind of wanted to move away from that because of his family's background, so he ended up closing it down, and people are telling him not to do it, that Harlem still needs help, and the fact that there's been gentrification going on means an awful lot of the people who would benefit from Harlem doing well are not benefiting from it. The money is basically going to the wealthy, which is kind of what happens when gentrification happens. Because gentrification is like a facet of this story, I'm interested even a little bit more. I like this kind of storytelling. And then we meet like the bad guys from the comic book. And it's some young adults of a variety of ethnicities, but all wearing very similar outfits that, like, using the visual language of comic book means they are slightly disenfranchised, and they're organising raids on high-priced stores to go and steal a bunch of stuff. They're not targeting small local businesses, they are going for the businesses that have taken them over and are profiteering off it and driving out people who can't afford to live and shop there. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, go for it. But Night Thrasher's not a fan of this because it's crime, even to the point where he's trying to get involved and stop like the crimes happening and get his ass kicked by kids, and cops stop him because he's a full-grown black guy. And it's like, yeah, dude, you need to be paying attention to this dynamic here. There's a power dynamic at play which is like a bigger problem than these kids stealing some jeans. But then we meet the person who's organising these kids, who's referred to as the OG, which is referred to in the comic book as being a cheesy-ass name, but I kind of like it. I think it's fun. Clearly the guy's having some fun with it. But when we meet him, this guy who turns out knows Night Thrasher and knows he's made money and tried to help the people of Harlem, he just sees him as somebody who's come in to try to disrupt, and instead of talking to him and explaining why he's doing it, explaining that he's trying to help these kids in the way he knows how, and the way that makes sense to him, by going for some very over-the-top direct action, but certainly is direct political action, he just beats the crap out of him. There's no conversation, there's no like, hey, maybe this guy who has in the past shown that he's got a willingness to help might help. Maybe he doesn't see it from the same point of view, but maybe we can have a conversation, have a dialogue, and come to something. He certainly, he wouldn't talk to or try and have a dialogue with the capitalists who are ruining his neighbourhood. I get that. But Night Thrasher was a hero, and he's worked with the community before, and it feels like just having these two go hell for leather at each other right from their first meeting is much more of a comic book way of writing. And I've criticised before where two like teams from alternate universes meet each other, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles meet Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The initial thing is always, oh, we must fight them because they're different to us and it's more exciting for the comic book. It feels like there's a hint of that writing going on here, and it's not great writing. It kind of meant I lost a little bit at the end there. I'm probably going to read issue 2, see if this pays off, because this is only the first issue. There's room for growth, there's room for it to do more than I expected, but because the artwork isn't great as well, I can't say I'm looking forward to the next one. I'll give it a shot, though. That's it for me for today, though. As always, make sure you do the social media thing. You know where to find us by now, because hell, you're watching this video. But until I see you again, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.